Welcome to the continuing session of change and innovation. In the last lecture, we understood what is change, what are the different types of change in terms of revolutionary change and evolutionary change. We started to discuss what are the steps of managing change. In that, we discussed the first step of managing change, which is realizing what are the forces for and against the change and what are the tactics of managing those forces. What are the forces for resistance to change, external forces, internal forces, and how to manage those forces. In today's lecture, we will continue with the steps for managing change, and we will look into some of the ways innovation is nurtured in the organization. To start with, we will start with step 2 of the change management process, which is like diagnosis of the problem. Now, how do you know like how do we know like when there is a problem is? First, we should try to differentiate the problem from the symptom of the problem. Most of the time what we observe is not the problem per se, but different symptoms of the problem. So, what we have to do first, we have to go and find out what is the root cause of a particular problem. Next, after we have done that, next step is deciding on what must be changed in order to resolve the problem. So, why it is occurring and what must be changed to resolve the problem, what processes are going wrong so that the problem can be resolved. Next, after we have done that, next step is to realize what will be the expected outcomes from the changes that we have done, so that we know like we have understood the problem and some changes have occurred which is leading to a positive outcome. So, we have to define first what expected outcomes are there when we deal with a particular problem and make some changes in the processes which are leading to that problem. And also important is how to measure that outcome. It is not enough to define a particular outcome, we have to measure that particular outcome. Some of the ways of diagnosing the problem is like how do you do it? The data collection measures are like through questionnaires, through direct observations, through like interviews of key people, then workshops, then we do surveys and documents and we record observations. These are the ways in which we diagnose a particular problem. Next step is the step 3 is selection of appropriate methods. These methods can be methods of change. These methods are grouped under different headings like structural approach, task and technology approach, human asset approach, so on and so forth, and we will visit each of these in details. So, when you are talking of structural approaches are managerial actions that attempt to improve effectiveness through some of the changes taking place in the structure of the organization, and by introducing new policies, introducing new framework into the organization, new procedures of doing things. So, it may involve your actual change of the whole system or some changes here and there. So, it is maybe a total change of the system and you start looking different as far as the structure is concerned, or you make some adjustments in the existing structure. Accordingly, the structural approach can again be divided into some categories of what are the structural approaches, like the categories of like re-engineering, then which again consists of like streamlining, integrating and transforming. When we are talking of re-engineering, the objective of re-engineering is to create a process, system and structure that meets customer needs effectively. Customers are the main focus here, so we see what are their needs and we then reorient our structure, our task and processes accordingly that will meet their needs appropriately and economically in a sound manner. So, it consists of three strategies mainly. One is streamlining, second is integrating and third is that of transforming. When we are talking of streamlining, it means like it breaks down in the main processes into segments, smaller segments and studies it to eliminate the waste in and errors in each of these small segments. And so, and it corrects for waste, delays and slow response time. That is called the process of streamlining. Next is the process of integrating. In the process of integrating, it is the unification of systems, procedures and or work related activities across function lines on the functional lines, so that there is a smooth flow of the work. That is called integrating. When you are talking of transforming, transforming is locating some of the best practices to be followed and by observing best in class of the type of organization which is there and trying to learn from them and try to be like them in our own ways of doing things. So, we try to observe the best in the class organization, see how they are functioning and then try to transform ourselves accordingly, so that we can also be like them. These are the three strategies of re-engineering. Second is another thing which is called management by objectives. So, management by objectives, it encourages managers to participate in establishing objectives for themselves and for their units. So, one of the major requirements of management by objectives is the manager's ability to make decision. If you are not able to make proper decisions, then this effort is not going to yield result. Management by objective involves like it requires managers to make decisions, and it is dependent on the participants' ability to define and attain objectives. Management by objectives needs a superior and subordinate who meet occasionally and they meet to discuss objectives that will contribute to the overall goal of the organization. So, they have to meet to discuss these things, and they jointly try to establish objectives which will help them to attain the goal, and they jointly decide what will be the attainable objectives by the subordinates. So, they again meet at a predetermined later date to evaluate the subordinates' performance based on the target set earlier and how far that person has progressed towards achieving that particular objective. An important part of this is also feedback that is given to the subordinate about how far he has progressed, what is the quality of his progress, where he needs to improve, and all these factors. So, internet effects of management by objectives is to improve subordinates performance and satisfaction. Because the subordinates also participate, it has different advantages in the sense, because the subordinate also participates in setting the objectives, it creates a commitment on the part of the it creates a commitment on the part of the employee to reach that objective, and it is also a satisfaction for the employee because he himself has set the objective which is a target for him, and he is like, when he can reach that goal, he feels like he has achieved the target, and it acts as a like intrinsic reward for him. So, these are the advantages of when you are talking of management by objectives. Next is the approach which is called the task and technological approaches. So, task and technological approaches focus directly on the work performed. Unique aspects of these approaches are: tasks focus on the job design changes, and technology focuses on the changes in the flow of work. So, it emphasizes its influence on its importance of training, so that we can get the proper knowledge and skill to do a work. The training can be through different ways. One is the on the job training, and the other is off the job training. When it is on the job training, so it is helpful in teaching specific skills to the employee, and through different techniques needed to master a job. So, on the job training, what happens while performing on the job, we can learn different skills by observing, by working, like practicing, and we gain the knowledge. Off the job training is helpful where there is complexity in the work that we have to do, and it requires concentration, and it requires like in-depth learning, which maybe is not possible to do while you are on the job setting, because you have pressures of completing that particular task. So, what happened to move you away from the pressures of the completing the task, and so that you can concentrate totally on the training part of like training required. So, that portion is taken care of by off the job training, where you can learn through like simulated sessions, where you try to work in a simulated environment which looks like the real, but is not the real scenario, and real situations like what you face on the job, but it gives you a good practice of what things to be done in the like while you go back to the job situation, and you know the details of the how to work on those specific things. So, next is in this off the job training. So, what happens is you get challenged about learning new things, learning new ways of doing things, experimenting, all this. You are more motivated for being a self learner. and there is a good motivation for self development. So, it provides resources to the people and material is there. But one of the drawback, one of the caution for point of concern for off the job training is we have to know what is the transfer of training. We may learn so many things off the job, but when transformed or transferred to the actual situation, sometimes this transfer is not proper. Like what? Like much of what is learned off the job is in many times not carried forward or applied on the job, because maybe other situations are not ready on the like because it is a simulated environment and there is some difference from the real situation. People are not able to match the two situations and know which part to apply, which part not to apply and how to apply. So, due to these doubts in mind, or they feel stressed because that was a stress free environment. This is a like challenges of completion, as their risks are involved also of doing errors. So, due to these factors, maybe the transfer is not proper in many cases, and we have to be cautious about it. Next approach is called the human assets approach. So, human asset approach in Peter Senge in the learning organization is based on this approach. Learning organizations value continuing individual and collective learning. So, an individual to grow requires that he or she should keep learning, both individually and also from the team. And more the individual grows, learns new things, new ways of doing things, new ways of looking at problems, the organization also grows along with it. This approach, again there are different subparts to it. First one of it is like teamwork or team building. The purpose of team building is to like improve work group performance via like through setting of targets, goals and priorities, then analyzing how the group affects its how the group gets its work done, then examining the group norms, group's ways of thinking and processes of communicating and decision making in the group, then examining interpersonal relationship within a group. All this helps to understand how our teams get formed and how do they function in a particular organization. The processes of understanding this is through diagnostic meetings where members exchange perceptions about of the problems which is faced by the group, and arriving at an action plan, developing an action plan which is acceptable to all. So, research support on this process of effectiveness, it's mixed, because even if the groups meet together, due to the process of to errors of group decision making that we know, which is group shift and group think, and the effect of cohesiveness of the group on the performance of the group. So, all these things will, and the size of the group, whether it is large group or a small group, whether it is like a very closely knit group or not, all these things will determine the effectiveness of the group and its functioning. So, even if they are meeting for a particular decision to discuss about the problems at hand and what changes are to be brought in. So, whether it becomes a decision where all members participate and all their voices are heard, and then it arrives at a decision, or it is majorly colored by the majority of the members, like it is colored by the situation where only the powerful members' views get heard and others say yes to it in conformity. So, these things determine whether it is an effective decision made or not. Next human asset approach is mentorship program, where individuals are used as role model and teachers for new organization members. So, what happened in this mentorship programs? So, a mentor is identified under whom a new member is placed, and who gets to see him doing the work, see how he solves a particular problem, what are the intuitions he is having, and what is the tacit knowledge he is using while solving problems and trying to learn the, like what we call the ropes of the organization from the mentor. So, this starts with like early identification of a talent, then finding the attitude of the employee and attitude of the employee and morale, and then finding out a mentor who will match with that attitude, and then setting of expectations by the this relationship of the mentor and the mentee, like what are the organizational culture, what it expects from the employee, and the mentor makes the employee to understand it. So, these are like the mentors transmit the organization's values and expectations to the mentees. But again, there are a few words of caution, is like formal mentor-mentee relationship should be voluntary for both the parties. Nobody should be forced to do mentorship under a particular person, and on the other side also the mentors should not be like forced to accept someone as a mentee. So, again, not everybody is suitable to become a mentor. In the sense, you have to be caring in nature, you have to be sharing in nature, you have to understand the attitude of the person, psyche of the person with whom you are sharing. So, these are important. You have to be trustworthy. On all these things, the mentor personally should have a great integrity of character. All these things will define who can be a good mentor. So, everybody is not suitable to become a mentor, and we also have to remember, like whatever the mentor passes on to the mentee, may not be all the time accurate, because it is colored by the mentor's own perception of certain things in the organization. So, this could be again like positive picture about the organization, overemphasis about the organization, or sometimes negative impressions also. So, it depends on the perception of the mentor and what he passes on to the mentee. So, these could be the drawbacks of this mentorship program. Next is like introspection programs, where mm, mm, encouraging employees to take time to reflect on certain things, like how to do things, what is the problem, how to find a solution for it, what will be my role in it, how I can help to achieve the goal. These are called introspections, in the sense looking inside and finding from within, like how I can be useful and how, what is my role in this whole change process. The goal of this introspection development program is like developing objectivity on the part of the employee, like you judge for yourself an objective way of solving the problem, and learning through experiencing different things, learning through focusing on different things, reflecting on different issues, and you trying to find out your own solutions for it, then improving the self confidence and increasing sense of self responsibility for certain things, and willingness to look internally rather than projecting blame externally. This is very important. How, what is my role, what I can do, where I need to improve, so that I can deal with this problem well, instead of telling like organizational resources are not available, my team members are not working, and all these factors, like job boss is not helpful, if there is a problem in performance. Then increasing tolerance for ambiguity and paradox encourages action taking, and it achieves a balance in life, and also it focuses, it encourages towards creativity and intuition, and sometimes it also helps to like move beyond oneself and transcend oneself, selfish interest, and look for the betterment of the organization as a whole, and how one can contribute to that process. Next is a multifaceted approach which combines techniques from different categories, and one of these multifaceted approach is that of is called organizational development, or OD techniques. OD techniques are collection of planned interventions, and which is framed, which is built on humanistic democratic values, and that seeks to improve together organizational effectiveness and employee well-being. So, it is a series of OD is a series of techniques and methods that managers can use in their action research program to increase the adaptability to the organization. So, OD is particularly knowing from people where the problem lies, how it can be solved, and what are the issues, what they need to perform well, how is the climate. So, all these interventions that tries to balance together the organizational effectiveness and employee well-being are called OD interventions or OD techniques. So, the goal of OD is organizational development is to, as already shared, to improve organizational effectiveness and to help people in organizations to reach their potential, their growth, and realize their goals and objectives. So, it can be used to accept change, the process of unfreeze, learn, and refreeze attitudes and behaviors. The OD values are, first is the respect for people, then trust and support, power equalization, confrontation, and participation. So, first we should respect each and every people, we must have trust and support for the activity, support others to develop, support others to express themselves, and there should be a power equalization. Means we have to accept that everybody is powerful in the organization and in the equal power platform, and then we have to confront the problem at hand, and everybody has to participate in the decision making process. So, OD techniques are like at different stages are like when we are talking of OD techniques to deal with the resistance to change. First is the education and communication, and like informing workers about the change and how they will be affected. Then participation and empowerment, involve the workers in the change process, and facilitation, employees help the employees with change. Then bargaining and negotiation, how for what the organization can afford and like what they want from the employees, sort of thing. Then manipulation is sometimes change the situation to secure acceptance. So, try to have a relook at the problem and the procedures and try to make changes so that we can get acceptance from all the people. And also in sometimes is coercion, force workers to accept change. So, this we find the last two techniques like coercion and manipulation are though not very ethical and preferable techniques. So, we should try to emphasize more on education and communication, participation, empowerment, facilitation and bargaining and negotiation if we are to like deal with the resistance to change. The OD techniques which help to promote changes are counseling, then which help people to understand that their perception of situation may not be right, then sensitivity training, so which is an intense counseling with group members, then aided by a facilitator, so which helps them to understand how others perceive them and how to deal more in a sensitive way with others. So, a process consultation and technique in which the my OD consultant works in very close association with one of the managers or involved in the processes, and helps him to improve his or her interaction with group members. Team building, in which the OD consultant sees how a team performs and help the team to achieve its objectives by increasing the communication and interpersonal relationship between the group members. So, intergroup training, so which utilizes team building to improve the work interactions of different functions or divisions. So, organizational mirroring is a technique in which the consultant, OD consultant, helps the two interdependent groups to explore their perceptions of each other and in order to improve their work interactions. So, total organizational interventions and which like it is an OD technique where all the managers are brought together to confront the issues of whether the organization is effectively meeting its goal or not. These are some of the techniques of OD techniques to promote changes. We will discuss to some extent in details what are like sensitivity training, and like survey feedback, and others like team building approaches. In sensitivity training, the or sometimes which is called T group or training groups, it seeks to change the behavior of individuals through unstructured group interactions. So, people meet together and they start discussing about certain things, and through these unstructured group interactions, what happens is people's own self comes out and they become more aware of self and others. So, it increases openness, it helps to develop empathy with others, improves listening skills, greater openness, and increased tolerance for others. But again, it should be, important point is that it should be guided by a facilitator, and we have to control and to see where situations are getting out of hand and where people are coming down to maybe personal attacks on each other or certain things, or where too much of the private self is getting like revealed or not. Because see, here people in different position powers from different organizational divisions functions may meet, and if outside and it is ethical, like the whatever sharing is done in the sensitivity or the T groups, it should be like it should be like people should be trustworthy enough not to divulge those information outside unnecessarily, even in situations where it is not required, because that may be sometimes detrimental to a person's social esteem and prestige, social status. In the sense, in T groups, sometimes very core self, hidden part of the self gets revealed, and we get to know each other like more uncovered, which is part more of the private self. And if we try to use this information unethically outside the T group sessions to get some of our own things, purposes served, then it may be dangerous for the individual. So, T groups training should always be guided by a facilitator who needs to know where to control, how to control, where it needs to stop, and how much of the self to be revealed, and beyond which it is not ethical for like self disclosure, because you have to go back in the work setting and work together, and sometimes this becomes a social esteem and status, prestige, all these things are all these things comes to question if some of these things get revealed outside. So, we have to be very responsible individuals while thinking of dealing with the information which we come to know about each other from the T group sessions, and we should never try to misuse those information. Next is survey feedback approach. So, it is the use of questionnaires to identify the discrepancies amongst members and perception, and discuss follows how and remedies are suggested. So, process consultation is again consultant gives insight to the client into what is going around the client, within the client, and between the client and other people, so that he identifies the processes which needs to be improved. Team building, so it is high interaction amongst the team members. So, to increase their trust and openness. So, it includes like goal and priority setting, development of interpersonal relations, role analysis for each members and responsibilities. So, team process analysis, how the team is functioning, who is playing what role in the team, and how they are interacting with each other. Intergroup development, so it helps to change the perception each group have about each other. Intergroup problem solving, again groups independently develop list of perceptions, they discuss and share those lists, look for which are the causes of misinterpretation, and they work to develop an integrated solution for it. Next important technique for bringing in change is the appreciative inquiry method. So, appreciative inquiry, it seeks to identify the unique qualities and special trends of an organization, which then can be built on to improve performance. So, it involves like recalling the strengths of the organization and dreaming, which is discovery, dreaming about the future of the organization and finding a common vision, and design and destiny is deciding how to fulfill the dream. So, here we are talking more of the strengths of the organization, unique features of the organization, and how it can be utilized to improve the performance of the organization. TQM is another aspect in which it is a philosophy and system of management. So, it focuses on high standards for quality and continuous improvement. So, the goal is to establish quality as a dominant priority. So, defining the quality based on satisfying the customer. So, focus on the environment is it changes the boundaries between the organization and its environment. So, role of the manager is very vital, because it is the responsibility of the manager to create a system that produce quality results, and managers are responsible for poor results. Employees are empowered to make decisions and take steps to improve quality. So, structural rationality is a horizontal process, and everybody is involved in it, starting from the suppliers and it ends with the customers, and the teams are more important, which facilitate task accomplishment. So, the philosophy towards change is that change, which again which is a continuous improvement and learning, these are necessary part of like organizational effectiveness. Next is action research. In action research, it is a change process which is based on like systematic collection of data, and then selection of a change action based on what this the data which is analyzed and what it indicates. So, action research is a process of generating and acquiring knowledge which managers can use to define an organization's desired future state. So, again it is used to plan a change system that allows the organization to reach that particular state of change that is required, and it helps in unfreezing, changing and refreezing the process, because data is collected from the people and the information is shared with them, their views are taken. All these things help them to get involved in the whole process, and it helps in facilitating the change and acceptance of the change. The processes in the action like 5 steps are: first is diagnosing the organization, like identify the problem and need to solve the problem, determining the desired future state what it should be, and implementing the action, which is again managers have to identify the problems which are possible, like identify which are the possible impediments to change. So deciding who will be responsible for actually managing the change and controlling the change process, like whether it's external change agents like who are experts in managing the change, or their internal change agents, so managers from within the organization who are knowledgeable about the situations to be changed, and then deciding which specific change strategy will be more effective in bringing in change through for unfreezing change and refreezing the organization. So like change which is top driven means change which is brought and designed by the upper level managers, and then it is implemented, or bottom up change where the change is implemented by employees at lower levels in the organization. So and until it is felt throughout the organization. So next step is evaluating the action. So this is that has been evaluating the action that has been taken and assessing the degree of to which the change has accomplished the desired objectives for it, and institutionalization of the action research. So members at all levels should be rewarded for their effort. So action research benefits are is problem focused rather than solution focused, and heavy employee involvement reduces the resistance to change, because they get involved in the process, because they, through their discussions they understand why change is necessary, what changes need to be brought, and suggestions are taken from them, like how it best can be brought in, change best can be brought in. People feel more involved in the whole process, and it reduces the resistance to change. Step 4 in the change management process is dealing with the impediments and limiting conditions of change. So, 3 primary influences on change program outcomes are: first is the leadership climate. So, the nature of leadership, the leadership style, and the administrative practices. So, it develops a work environment, and that work environment which may facilitate change or may inhibit change. So, that is very important. Change program requires a supportive environment. Formal organization, and this is it defines like the top management policies and philosophy, organizational structure, control system, and legal precedents. So, it must be compatible with the proposed change. Otherwise, like if the structure is not compatible, you do not get a if the structure is not compatible, we do not get a platform where the change can be brought in and reviewed to see whether it is working or not. Third is the organizational culture. It impacts on the environment resulting from group norms and informal activities values. So, it is also should be compatible with the change effort. Step 5, which is implementing the method, it is a stages of commitment to change with the influence, the implementation of the change. The different stages of commitment to change with the passage of time are, and with increasing employee support, are first is preparation for the change. So, initial contact and awareness generation, acceptance of the change involves understanding and decision to implement, and commitment means involves installation, and finally institutionalization. So, the perceived level of satisfaction and dissatisfaction with the present situation and perceived level of risk taking, risk proneness or risk aversion of the particular members will determine the readiness for change. So, and also how far personal risk is involved in these situations will determine the readiness for change. If the level of dissatisfaction is high and personal risk is low, there is high readiness for change. So, and the readiness for change also influences the implementation procedure. If one is ready for the change, it is easy to implement. So, implementation process will depend on the two things, which is the timing, which is when to implement, and it should consider the organization's operating cycle and amount of groundwork that precedes the program. So, unless immediately the change is required, implementation should not conflict with the daily operations. And scope is selecting the scale of change. So, first is one, the programs are usually implemented in small scale in few departments, see how it is working and it is evaluated to, and then a feedback is taken, maybe reoriented and revisited, changes are made in the change program itself before it is implemented on a large scale to the entire organization. Next step is this, evaluating the program effectiveness, which involves determining what are the objectives of the program. So, describing what are the required actions to achieve the objectives. So, establishing some baseline against which changes can be observed, controlling the extraneous factors and detecting the unanticipated consequences, and then when all these factors are controlled, then we can tell by seeing a situation how far the change management program have been effective in bringing out the changes. Some of the contemporary change issues for today's managers are like stimulating the innovation. So, for stimulating innovation, we have to understand what innovation is. So, innovation is a new idea applied to initiating or implementing a product, a new way of doing things, new way of designing what is the new product, new process, or what is the service. And sources of innovation could be what helps innovation is some structural variables like organic structural organic structure, which is long tenured management, and slack resources, inter-unit communication, supportive organizational culture, and good human resources like people who can think innovatively. Idea champions are individuals who take an innovation and actively and enthusiastically promote the idea, build support, overcome resistance, and ensure that the idea is implemented in the organization. Next important change issues for today's managers are creating a learning organization. So, learning organization is an organization that has developed a continuous capacity to adapt and change. So, these are characteristics of learning organization. Is it holds a shared vision, it discards old way of thinking, it promotes communication, it promotes interpersonal relationships, it communicates openly, and it works together to have a shared vision of looking at things. And in this connection we can discuss about two types of learning, which is the single loop learning and the other is the double loop learning. In the single loop learning, so people are using processes in which errors are connected using past routines and practices. And in double loop learning, errors are corrected by modifying the organizational objectives itself, policies and standard routines. So, what is the so in double loop learning, what happens? Feedback is taken at every step and we have to revisit the objective itself. In single loop learning, once an objective is set, we feel like this is the correct thing and we want to change the processes accordingly so that the objective is to be reached. In double loop learning, we revisit the objective also when necessary and try to change it. So, and see whether errors are residing over there, and then we try to bring in certain changes. The fundamental problems in traditional organizations are like they are fragmented based on specialization. There is overemphasis on competition and it's more reactive in nature, which which misdirects attention to problem solving rather than like creation. So, sometimes we have to think of problems that may arise, think of newer ways of addressing issues. So, and think of what instead of waiting for problems to creep in, we may think of different problems that may arise and try to find solutions for it, be ready for the unforeseen circumstances. So, these are not possible in traditional organizations. So, managing a learning organization is managing learning, which is establish a strategy, redesign the organization structure, reshape the organization's culture. So, managing change is culture bound. So, some of the questions, relevant questions are: do people believe like change is possible? How long will it take to bring change in this particular organization? So, how will the societal culture affect the efforts of the employees? So, is the resistance more in this organization due to the culture in which it is operating? So, how do the idea champions function and they go for getting support for the innovation efforts? Some of the questions related to this chapter are: what is organizational change? What are the targets of change? So, discuss in details the different types of change with special emphasis on re-engineering. So, what are the different approaches to change management? In this connection, discuss learning principles in change management. What is planned change? Discuss Kotter's 8 steps of managing planned change. What are the different types of change agents? Who is more important in bringing change or more effective, the external or the internal change agents? Give your views on it. So, again, like describe a model for managing organizational change. What are the forces for and against the change? How do you overcome resistance to change? Discuss appropriate methods of organizational change under structural approaches, task and technology approaches, human asset approaches and multifaceted approaches. Which approach you think is best and why? Then, what are the impediments and limited conditions or limiting conditions of change management? Discuss the steps involved in implementing the method. So, again, do you think it is necessary to evaluate program effectiveness? write short notes on stimulating innovation, creating a learning organization, and relationship of culture and change. The answers to these questions that you find is discussed throughout the lecture, that 2 sessions that we have taken on change and innovation. And if you find answers to these questions properly, you develop an understanding why change is important for a particular organization, and if change is dealt properly, then it can help the organization to become more effectively. But if change is not managed properly, then effectiveness of the organization suffers. So we have to understand how to manage change, how to sometimes promote change, invite change when you're talking of innovation, how to deal with this innovation, how to deal with the learning organization, what are the qualities of learning organization, what are the factors which should be present so that there is a proper environment for a learning organization and people can innovate within it. So think creatively, make creative solutions to problems, and sometimes instead of going for problem solving, they can define problems, think of new problems and try to work for it in a more creative way. All this will help in increasing organizational effectiveness and also give a feeling of like intrinsic motivation to the employees, in the sense of joy of working in that organization, which involves them in the change process, takes their suggestions in the change process, and works along with them to implement the change, rather than forcing the change on them which they cannot accept or which is beyond their capacity to deal with. So involving the people in the change management process is also very important, so that it leads to organizational effectiveness and both personal satisfaction and development of the and growth of the employees. If that is done properly, then it results in the best performance of the organization. Thank you.